a lot of the messaging feels very Neanderthal.
You see the way that the generation before us acted as men, and now you're being brought up and told, no, you cannot act like that.
Right.
Well, that was my example.
Yeah.
So now you're telling me I need to form a new identity.
All right, it's after the show, and I finally get the opportunity to hang out with 4 guys. And so I'm like, what are we going to talk about? We can talk about absolutely anything. But the thing that keeps rolling around in my mind as a mom of a boy is how much time and energy is spent sort of etching out girls' empowerment and women's empowerment and how girls can do anything. And I was raised under that rhetoric for sure. We're seeing so much of that with our kids now. They can do anything. The girls can play hockey. You can be the prime minister. Shoot for the stars. Things are changing for men, I find. And I wonder sometimes about if there's confusion about the role or the identity, what it means to be a man right now in today's society, because things are changing so quickly. Donnovan, what do you think? Have these thoughts gone through your mind? Is there anything that ever you find confusing about it, this whole idea of being sensitive but also masculine but not toxically masculine? Like, how does it all work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm personally a bad example because I've always just thought, like, I'm me. Like, I'm not defined by,
your gender. It's not so much about your gender.
I thought I was a bad example. You can't say that.
So none of you feel defined by your gender?
No.
Well, to a sense, like, there are very stereotypical masculine things that I just don't do. I'm not good at fixing things.
Yeah.
I don't golf. I don't drink beer.
Yeah.
I always was the person made fun of because I drank a girly drink, and I was just like,
what's the girly drink? I bet I drink it.
Joey's Twisted Teas?
Yeah, Twisted Tea.
I like Twisted Tea.
I think you're a Durango cooler kind of guy.
Oh, sangria,
Yes.
Wine
but I've always
Wine
felt like I was
coolers,
just so comfortable and confident. I didn't need to be put in someone else's box.
Yeah.
But in having conversations with some of my male friends at this age and stage, I think where some of the confusion is, okay, well, I'm in a relationship and I want to advocate for my female partners in the working space so that they make as much, if not more than me. But does that mean I still pay for the meal? Is that disrespectful if I pay for the meal? I want my wife to be able to not just be a homemaker. She should be able to lean in terms of her career. But are some of those traditional roles around the household that were given to men, are those still all mine? And so navigating that as our relationship to women change, navigating where men fit into that, I think has been a little bit tricky.
Yeah, I totally get that. So it's like, what roles then, what are the rules? I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to, right?
Yeah, and I think some of the standards that we have been traditionally judged by still apply. I still have female friends who, when engaged, their friends say, well, let me see the ring. Or, oh, well, you know what, he has a good job, right? So we're still applying some of those things, even though the situation has changed in terms of the opportunity for women in many ways.
Interesting. I do hear that. I hear that it's, we all sort of subscribe to the patriarchy. It's not just men subscribing to the patriarchy. It's like racism. Everyone can jump on board. Black people can jump on board. Asian people can jump on board. It's a system. So what you do see is you see many people holding up systems that have been going on for eons. And it's hard to sort of figure out, like, women hold it up too. You're right. We do want to see the ring. And we do talk about the good job. So where does that mean it all falls when it comes to how you move through the world and society? Bro Laws, do you think about this at all?
I do, but I think also, like, to contradict, I think, like, I and my wife, we kind of do hold to a lot of the traditional ideals, roles. Yeah, where my wife, we early on in our marriage, we had talked about it, and she wanted to stay home with the kids before they went to school. But we're at an interesting stage of life where our youngest is into JK now, and my wife is, I mean, it's been hard through the pandemic, but it was kind of like, I get to get my life back, and I get to figure out what I'm going to do in this next stage of life. And I think it's important for men to just be supportive in those roles, where now we're kind of trying to identify that and see where she's going to move, and it's kind of forcing me to step back in a little bit more to support that and to be there for her as she goes through that next step. And with my oldest son, I think we're just trying to work through those types of things where he gets to see that. Kids live and learn through experience.
Totally.
Everything they're seeing is what they're going to mature up to be. So by setting those examples, being there, supporting my wife, I feel like that's going to then raise a generation of men that will be there for them as well.
Totally. I'm going to come back to you in a second, Joey, but first,
problem.
Bruce.
Well, I think these are systems, but they're also cultures. It is a culture, and culture moves. Culture is always moving. So one of the things that I see as a personal responsibility as a guy and a guy of privilege is to be able to see the big picture and use that privilege in a way that is in service of voices that don't get heard. So I'm in a lot of meetings, I'm in a lot of board meetings. And what the stereotype and behavior, it's not stereotypical completely. There is a behavior for men to be a little like, and I'm like that. Like, I got something to say and I'm saying it. But because I also have privilege, how do I take a breath and look around the room and see who we haven't heard from? And quite often, it is not a guy. So how do we use that privilege to ensure that other voices are heard? And over time, then that becomes a norm in a meeting, like in a very practical sense. The norm is, before we move on, we just check and see if everybody's had their points heard. And that can evolve our culture over time.
It can. Have you guys seen any of the like hyper masculine podcasts that are out now? And you know, the stuff that's being discussed, it's being parodied so much on TikTok because they're the woke generation and they're like, these dudes are alpha, and a lot of the stuff is coming out and it's misogynist and it's about, I'm going to talk about Kevin Samuels as well. I'm sure you know him. He has passed away, but do you guys all know Kevin Samuels?
I looked it up so I could be here with credibility.
Good.
Come on, you're laughing
Millions
because you did this.
of subscribers, and he would, you know, spend a lot of his time berating black women and telling them that they need to be high-value women in order to attract high-value men. A lot of the messaging feels very Neanderthal, but I think a lot of it comes from this idea of men not necessarily knowing where they fit in society because things have changed a lot. So do you see any of that, Joey? Do you see that confusion at all? And do you understand where that might come from?
Yeah, I mean, especially with our generation, it is very confusing because you see the way that the generation before us acted as men, and now you're being brought up and told, no, you cannot act like that. Well, that was my example. So now you're telling me I need to form a new identity, which is good. It needs to happen 100% because the old way of doing things was, it was wrong. And a lot of men, it was the easy way out, I feel. It was, okay, I'm gonna go to work, I'm gonna provide, I'm gonna come back, and that's gonna be my life. And that was the easy way out, in my opinion, because it's a lot harder to either not go to work and be the one to stay home and provide for your family in that way, or to go to work, come home, and now say, okay, what can I do for you? What can I do for my family? I need to put that in the past because that part of my day is over, and how can I be present now? It's such a difficult thing to navigate, and we don't have a playbook on it. We have a past generation that had that Neanderthal outlook that said, no, you're being a beta male because you're going home and you're cooking dinner for your family. No, I'm being an alpha male because I'm providing in many ways for my family. So we're learning this as we go, and that's why I think the dad village is so important, because you're able to work through these things with other guys that are going through the same thing as you, that have said, this works for me, this doesn't, and being vulnerable and opening up about these parts of our lives is so critically important for our mental health, because I think it weighs on you so much, and men traditionally just let that weigh on them. And they
and I feel bad. I feel bad for men. It's not just us. We're not the only ones losing if we're going by these old rules. Like, who wants to be a breadwinner? That's a lot of pressure. And you've got to make sure the bacon continues to come home. Like, when things go off, like, that's tough. That's stressful. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as the gay guy in the room, the wives complain about their husbands. I hear all of it. I know all of it. They complain about their husbands. And the one universal theme, and I don't think straight men would necessarily disagree with this, is straight men have a very hard time developing intimate relationships outside of their marriage. And this is not to a person, but when you talk to straight men about like, who's your best friend? It's almost always their wife, provided that they're in a productive, happy relationship.
Yeah.
Whereas for gay men and women, we got like a roster here. We got the best friend for this, and the best friend for that, and the best friend for this. So we have that inherent, that predisposition to community building or village building.
Yeah.
And my greatest hope for this next generation of men is that they learn not only the value of those relationships, but they learn the skill to cultivate those relationships. Because women and gay men, we're like planting seeds and fertilizing the seeds, and we're in that garden all the time.
Yeah.
And the hunter-gatherer paradigm may be dated, but in some ways it's a reasonable fit here.
And I think that's kind of
Totally.
what we're trying to do as well within the construction industry, because when, like, especially in our business, it's looked at as like you're the bravado man, like you're the strong alpha, whatever. But within our company, we're trying to do that. We have conversations while we're working about vulnerable, intimate stuff, because that's what it should be. You should be able to have that and to open up and to have that village, that community that you can bond with to talk about those things, right?
Absolutely. I think all four of you are doing it, to be honest with you. Like, just the way you live your lives, you are giving people the space to actually be themselves in whatever way they want to be. It doesn't, like, whether you skew feminine, masculine, all of that stuff, if you even believe in that. I think it's important that you guys are being vulnerable in your separate spaces. So thank you so much.
One last thing.
Oh,
one last thing, I swear.
Go ahead, Bruce.
We overuse the word vulnerable.
Okay. Well,
We're
I don't
not-
think so.
We're not being vulnerable.
Yeah, we are.
We're being in communication.
Yeah, but it's
So
so
vulnerable-
vulnerable. If the
other-
system
no.
is not necessarily open to hearing these sorts of things, you are putting yourself in a situation where you're vulnerable.
Sure. One way to look at it.
He doesn't want to agree.
No, another way to look at it is this is how human beings are designed.
Good, right.
Yeah.
We are designed to be in communication. We are designed to have these conversations. Vulnerable others it. So we have to like find a way to like, okay, I'm gonna learn to do this really risky thing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Whereas like once you become a master at having real conversations, I don't think I'm vulnerable. I'm just all here. I got it all.
I still think it's vulnerability.
I mean,
I do.
It's maybe how we have been designed, but it's not how we've been socialized.
Right.
Sure.
So, for men, our attribution has been, do you have the corner office? What role do you have at your workplace? You haven't been getting attribution for, how is your kid doing at school? How is the household? How is your relationship? So I think it's vulnerable in terms of putting yourself out there to have conversations outside.
If you were to talk to a straight man who has none of these skills, do you think you'd have a better job selling them on that behavior by saying, I want you to be vulnerable, or would we have more success encouraging them to just be in communication, like a human being? Let's just do that. That it's normal. It's how we should expect it and train it and value it as normal.
Yeah, it's a philosophical difference, I think, and you're saying like use the language of the folks that you're trying to communicate to. Yeah.
I think it's just a hard shell to break through in a lot of people.
Yeah.
Where there is that big exterior, and I think it just takes time, and we can say vulnerability or whatever, but it's building that community. It's becoming closer to someone, where it's getting a friendship from talking about what happened in the game last night to talking about what happened in the bedroom last night, what happened with your kids, what happened at school.
Without
and
making
it's
fun
just
of each other.
changing
Like
the
it's a proper conversation. Yeah. Okay, all good. I mean, obviously, we could continue to go on.
Oh my God, you totally could. I'm writing in my diary that I disagreed with Tracy. And this is like the highlight of my
It's
entire
very
week.
good for the vulnerability building of our relationship.
So good.
Thanks for joining us, guys. It's so good.